environmentalism and the belief in the need to tackle climate change is tantamount to a religion in Europe. The saliency of this issue in Europe, in the midst of this terrible economic crisis, has almost disappeared. How do you persuade people when they don't see this as an urgent issue that needs to be dealt with, when they do see their jobs and their incomes and their housing and the prospects for their children getting a job as urgent? How on earth do you persuade them that this matters?
Well, of course, everything you're saying is true, which is if someone doesn't perceive an issue as directly affecting their family, if they don't talk about it at the kitchen table when they're alone, then it doesn't matter. And in particular, in a democracy, which is what I believe we live in, unless you're willing to change your vote over it, it doesn't matter. So this issue polls in the 70s. 70% of Americans say they understand that the Earth is warming, that it's probably caused by people, and that we should do something about it, and that they would like their representatives to do something about it. In the 70s. But it is not their #1 issue. When they're sitting around the kitchen table, they don't perceive it as their leading jobs issue. They don't perceive it as their leading health issue. They don't perceive it as directly impacting their kids. So the question is, how does that happen? Let's make one distinction in that. This is a generational issue. You know, if you talk to people who are under the age of 30, those people, for them, they perceive this as something that will directly, significantly impact their lives in a major way and a major negative way unless it's dealt with. I think this is, I've had friends of mine who I consider to be some of my good friends who are around 60 who've said to me, you know, honestly, I'm never going to deal with this. It's not going to impact my life. So the question about saliency is also a question about urgency, which is the time frame. I think, you know, when George was talking about insurance, from my point of view, almost the biggest strategic question is how long is this going to take before we have a real problem, which is the salience question. Because people can't look out that far because they have so many actually urgent problems, whether it's their health or their kids' education or their paycheck or wanting to save for retirement. So looking out 10 or 15 years is just beyond most people's honestly good ability to do in a meaningful way. The way that George expressed timing was also the way he expressed risk, which was through insurance, which is to say, shouldn't we spend some money now to avoid a huge problem in the future, which people are very accustomed to do. And so that is a way to both take away the issue about risk, like, is this really true? I don't need to convince you that you're wrong. I just need to convince you that it's possible that you're wrong. You don't have to lose. You just have to admit that it's possible that we could be right and we should spend some money to avoid it. So when I think about salience, the two ways to do it are either are we going to put it in a context that Americans can get behind across parties in a bipartisan fashion, or are we going to await for an event to happen that's going to change people's mind? And you know, an event to change people's mind, I believe, has to impact them immediately or their family immediately. So that Sandy was not a huge event in Northern California. If the Mississippi dried up and couldn't have barge traffic, that was not a major event in Northern California. The concept of global warming is way too diffuse, it's unimaginable, it's also something that overwhelms people and they don't know what to do. So when you ask about salience, you have to bring it down to somebody's kitchen table and you have to put it in terms that they can either understand and think it's a good deal in a bipartisan fashion, or else something's going to have to change their mind that's so dramatic that people go, you know what, this really is the biggest issue in the world.